Este mes se celebró el Día Internacional de la Enfermería, una conmemoración anual que nos permite dar visibilidad a un sector importante de la salud a nivel mundial. En esta ocasión, buscamos profundizar en la importancia que tiene la salud mental y el bienestar en la enfermería.
Y deberíamos de estar al 100 para poder dar el 100 a mi paciente. Pienso que no solo es tarea de enfermería, es tarea de todos para tener una sociedad sana.
Un estudio realizado en el año 2020 por el Observatorio de Salud Pública de la Universidad CES Medellín, Colombia, en conjunto con la Universidad de Guadalajara, México, demostró que más del 67% del personal de enfermería presentó el síndrome de burnout o desgaste profesional, una realidad a la que, según expertos, se debe prestar atención.
Pero no para curar enfermos, no. La salud mental es en la vida cotidiana también que necesitamos. Y en ese sentido, la salud mental no tiene recursos, ni en el sistema de salud, ni en el sistema educativo escolar, en ningún lado, ¿verdad? Entonces, es necesario que la salud mental se considere un factor fundamental.
Dispensar cuidados de calidad es una función esencial dentro del ámbito de la enfermería. En los centros hospitalarios y los servicios públicos de salud, el personal de enfermería se encuentra en contacto directo con el enfermo, la familia y la comunidad. Es una responsabilidad para la cual necesitamos garantizar enfermeros sanos para mantener naciones sanas.
Bienvenidos a nuestro webinar.
Welcome to our webinar, Healthy Nurses, Healthy Nations, Using Virtual Care. I want to thank everyone for connecting virtually, and we want to welcome everyone. My name is Mildred Espinosa, and I have the privilege this morning of being your host for this webinar. Once again, thanks to Hippo Hive in Spanish, we are pleased to bring you world-class panelists to speak on the issues of vital importance, such as the nursing sector in Latin America. And we're going to start our first segment by inviting our panelist who's with us live at our EBLA Digital Studios, Ms. Karen Dubon. She's been a nurse for over 28 years and has worked in hospitals, both in preventive and private areas. She's been an educator for over 15 years, training health and nursing professionals, and she's currently the director of the School of Nursing at the Mariano Galvez University and vice president of the National Nursing Council of the nation of Guatemala. So then Ms. Karen Dubon, she's going to provide and set the framework by sharing on the current challenges that nursing is facing in our day and time. It's a pleasure to have you here, Ms. Karen, and the time is all yours to launch this webinar, which we've been waiting throughout this entire month. And so welcome once again. Thank you, Mildred. Also, want to greet everyone that's joining us here in this webinar. And first of all, I just really want to thank, Hippo Hive in Spanish and EBLA Digital during this month as we celebrate the International Month of Nursing. And this space allows us to be able to make this field known and be able to fill this space concerning nursing in Guatemala. Thank you for this opportunity and for driving and boosting our field this month. And we want to reach the entire population of Latin America and Guatemala. And so then now we're going to speak a little bit and jump into the subject to be able to set the framework and being able to know more deeply concerning the current challenges that nursing faces. What challenges are we talking about specifically? Yes, well, when we talk about challenges, we're obviously speaking about something that requires work, consistency, and dedication. And in this regard, I'd like to highlight the fact that the challenges are aimed towards the individual, towards the institutional, the collective, and of course, towards the governmental as well, which is also very important. So to be able to address these subjects, I'd rather to address, as a holistic being, including every aspect, social, cultural, and economical. As nurses, we're all professionals, but first of all, we are individuals. And so we also have individual needs that we need to address. And that's an important challenge that we need to face. First of all, to be healthy and whole physically, in our mental health, in our spiritual environment and cultural environment, to be able to take on challenges at a collective and at a guild level. And there is enormous challenge right there because we need to project ourselves towards society. We need to break certain paradigms and we need to root ourselves strongly. And we need to create and remain in continual and consistent education, equipment, further development. And we also need to work on specific policies that can also allow us to be able to take up key positions that can allow us to take certain positions and roles and projects and endeavors for the ongoing development of nursing in Guatemala. The challenge indeed is great because it actually covers many different spheres and we cannot work individually. So we need to work them first, I as a person, as an individual, but I also need to work it at an institutional level and above all, and especially at a governmental level. Now, we've been sharing throughout the entire time concerning these specific challenges, and throughout the entire month, we've also had the opportunity of being able to make different nurses known that were able to share personal, firsthand testimonies on what life as a nurse is all about, especially during this time of the pandemic, which is something that's really taking a toll at a global level. But now let's just speak, where should this change actually start? How can we actually take a part in it? Well, as I mentioned before, first of all, the change has got to be at an individual, at a personal level. I, as an individual, have got to foster activities that keep me healthy and whole, physically, first of all, from my own lifestyle, from my own decisions, and enjoy physical exercises, physical activity, and to be able to stress many different points in the biological spectrum to be able to enjoy proper health. And we, in addition, we also need to take into account people's spirituality, which is also an area, and to develop leadership, promote public policies, and involve in guilds, get involved politically. We need to develop a technological culture that is a vital ingredient, because as nurses, we're always worried, in our daily activities and everything, to be assisting patients firsthand, the treatment and the kindness that we need to show, that all too often we overlook these areas. Why? Because we're surrounded by so many different administrative processes that could very well be steered and managed technologically, allowing us then to be able to leverage our scope, our reach, and provide much more quality care and attention towards people. And as nurses, we need to participate in guild activities and political activities rooted in division, and also to carry out activities based on evidence, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to gain spaces. And we need to participate as active members in different leadership roles, and also at high-ranking decision-making. Now, among this, you also mentioned, and thank you for your participation as the director of the vice president of the National Nursing Organization of Guatemala. And so we need to provoke that proactivity, that individual proactivity. So then what can we do from the government standpoint? We've named this webinar, Healthy Nurses, Healthy Nations, precisely because we have that opportunity and the concept to have a healthy nurse. That concept is going to have a ripple effect in the patient, in the family, in the community, and the nation as well. We're actually going to be speaking on this, with others, wonderful panelists concerning these individuals. But at a government perspective, what do governments require, or what do they expect, or what do you expect governments to be able to do and provide to be able to produce and trigger change? And what can they do to be able to enhance and have healthier nations? Well, then, I believe that first of all, it's important for governments to acknowledge the vital importance that nurses play within their systems. As nurses, at a global scale, over 80% of health professionals, they're comprised of nurses. What does this mean? That a person, the population's health is literally in the hands of nurses. Governments need to make the most of this field, that nursing is the people and the staff that are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They know the system and they know people. They know the needs. They know the system. So the government needs to identify, every government needs to identify a wonderful opportunity to have in the front line the process led by nurses. That's also very important. And every nation's government should also build, different care models, health models that are innovative, technologically innovative, that's led by nurses. And they also need to invest within the labor force, because right now, especially in Latin America, we're way below the amount of nurses that's actually required to be able to properly provide services for our nurses. In many nations, especially in Latin America, sometimes there's only one nurse or 0.7 nurses per 10,000 inhabitants. So that government needs to invest in new positions and new staffing to be able to achieve greater results. But this also requires identify dignity. We need to dignify, them as a worker, as a service that's provided, because if governments were much more aware, much more keen on the need that nurses have, they should go and bet on training, on technology of nursing staff and nursing professionals. So then they need to implement within all of their realms, all of their spheres of healthcare professionals, technology that can aim to leverage and maximize their work in order to be able to dedicate more towards our field and our expertise, to not, and that way our attention isn't drawn away from it, and so that they can invest in technology that can further enhance and make us swifter and make our work much more efficient, freeing our time to be able to care for patients, which is the core, which is the essence and the humanization of people, individuals. So we need to invest in technology and further development and training. Now that you mentioned the subject of training and education, Ms. Karen Duban is currently the director of one of the largest universities, Mariano Galvez, in the nursing field. Educators, we really want to thank every student that has actually connected to this wonderful webinar. We want to welcome you. Thank you so much for taking the time and for your interest, especially to be able to improve and enhance, the field of healthcare, and for you who are future healthcare professionals. How can we improve the educational field? That's another important subject right there, because we need to break paradigms. Because as nurses, we're always just so keen. Well, I've done it this way. That's how we've always done it. No. That's no longer the time now. We need to bet on technology, dive in head first, because that's the most important way to be able to enhance education, to be able to accelerate it. And it's going to bring dramatic changes concerning what we've been doing up to now and what we need to start doing. We also need to invest on virtual reality, augmented reality, headsets, tablets, telemedicine, telehealth. This is something that we need to foster right from at the offset when they start being trained in their individual fields, And so there are different methodologies, different ways that are being utilized, not only in Mariano Galvez University, but also in many different other universities in Guatemala and of course the world over. And so as colleges, universities that are at the forefront, we need to invest in these areas, because it is a wonderful way to be able to reach the furthest corners of any nation and any population. And so this is a role that we need to enhance, invest in it, believe in it. But first of all, as I said, first I need to work at an individual, in my own self, because I could have all the equipment, all the necessary technology, but if I don't learn how to use it, how to employ it, I have to do a willful decision personally. Then I need to work in associations, in schools, where I can share my voice, I can share my vote, and that can allow me to improve policy, decision making, public policies that can allow us to have greater involvement, engagement, to take a much more active leadership role, to empower us and demonstrate that nurses have the ability to be able to lead any type of process, because they've been equipped, they have the knowledge base, the skill set, and they're the ones that are closest to the patients 24/7. So if we break the paradigms and we choose not to do things as we have up to now, that will produce a major shift. And this pandemic has proven that the only thing that we can be sure of is uncertainty. Uncertainty is the only thing that we can be sure of with this pandemic. So we have to focus on it, be open to innovation, and push policy that will ensure that all our nursing and health professionals will engage in it. Thank you so much for setting the framework, understanding what you mentioned. We have these challenges before us at an individual level in the healthcare fields, at an institution level, in government. So we do understand we have these challenges, and we need to look at these changes, especially because we live at a moment of uncertainty, and that should actually be a learning process for all of us to be able to strengthen all healthcare professionals. One last thought, please, to conclude your participation in this segment before proceeding with our next panelist. Well, honestly, this would be the last thought. It'd be aimed at our governments. We need governments to understand that nursing is actually the solution for swift, sustainable, profitable expansion of universal healthcare. Invest in the nursing field, and this can be achieved in a swift, much more effective way with the quality and the care that's necessary. And I just want to close by saying, why do we have this? Why have we had this campaign throughout the entire month? Healthy nurses, healthy nations, because of what I said before. If a nurse is healthy physically, in their mental health, in their spiritual environment, in every cultural part that surrounds them, they're going to project it. They're going to be able to serve with greater quality, with greater compassion, and in the long term, it's going to affect and have a direct toll on the population in a positive way. That's why healthy nurses will be able to contribute, will always contribute for healthier nations. Thank you so much for your time. If there's any other question, but this is what I would like to contribute and highlight and stress our importance at this moment in time. The word is to call on all nurses to work on public policies together with government officials, but we have to start at individual level to cause a sustainable impact in our institutions, and especially in our governments. Ms. Karen Duvon, thank you so much for your wonderful contributions in this webinar and for your wonderful collaboration with the National Nursing Council of Guatemala. We're extremely grateful for these contributions. And now that we have a clear framework concerning the challenges being faced in nursing currently, now we're going to focus with our next panelist concerning the benefits of a good mental health and wellness in nursing to improve patient, family, community, and societal care. And so next, we'd like to welcome Dr. Ralph Piedmont, who received his doctorate in personality psychology from Boston University. He was a tenured professor at Loyola University in Maryland and is currently the director of the Center for Professional Studies in the United States. And so it's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Piedmont over here.
Hello.
Welcome.
How are you doing today?
Very well. Thank you very much for joining.
Everyone doing well?
Very well.
It's a pleasure to be here.
This is
I
your
would
time
like
now.
to thank the HIPAA Hive. I'd like to thank ELBA for all the work they've done in nursing me through all of this to make sure that I'm here on time with an effective presentation. Mildred, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Elmer, thank you for all of your help. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming today and participating in this webinar. My name is Dr. Ralph Piedmont. I am the Managing Director at the Center for Professional Studies. I am a personality psychologist, so my work involves identifying those key psychological forces that drive us and whose satisfaction provides a deep sense of fulfillment. Understanding who we are is an essential first step in creating a positive, productive lifestyle. My talk today will focus on introducing you to my research on a new aspect of our personal nature, the numinous. The numinous is a core feature of our personalities and is responsible for shaping and developing our unique selves. It is also at the heart of finding a very powerful force for creating and maintaining ultimate well-being. Nursing, as you well know, is a very dynamic, active, and essential aspect of the healthcare environment. Nurses are called upon to fill many roles in healthcare, from overseeing the management of patient care to addressing the physical needs of patients, as well as caring for the emotional and social challenges that accompany any medical issue. Nurses are truly the superheroes of the medical world. But while nurses are commonly the go-to professionals for patient care and treatment management, little attention is given to how nurses themselves address their own issues of self-care. Called daily to be fully present and actively compassionate to patients, Over time, this can become draining and serve to create feelings of burnout. Nursing is a high energy profession. To do well, one needs to be fully committed. But to sustain professional success, nurses need to invest time in managing their own physical, emotional, and social needs. There are many stressors that all healthcare professionals experience, some direct, like our work duties and our personal life demands. Others are more indirect, sometimes labeled secondary stressors. These are stressors experienced when we encounter and manage the struggles of those around us. Over time, these external challenges may come to weigh us down. Being able to effectively manage all of these pressures is essential for finding personal and professional success. There's a large literature that exists, which outlines the basic steps one needs to take in order to manage day-to-day hassles and stressors. A lot of this information will be given in other presentations in this very session. As such, I want to step back and take a broader perspective and discuss aspects of ultimate well-being. While we all need to find specific ways to reduce experienced stress in our lives and to avoid or diffuse conflict, we also need to create an overall personal centering, a style of life, which is itself intrinsically healthy and resilient. Coping techniques and practices are like a house that we build that helps us to keep us safe and secure. However, the ultimate value of this home rests with the quality of its foundation. For coping, that foundation rests with the numinous, the most intimate aspect of our personhood. A developed sense of the numinous creates a solid foundation that provides confidence in the durability of our home. It creates a healthy way of being. Distinguish between specific coping skills and a healthy coping lifestyle, I use the term eudaimonia to refer to the latter. In the healthcare world, the term sense of coherence is frequently used and represents a similar concept. Both represent a foundational, health-oriented style of living that gives us a baseline orientation to managing challenge and stress in our lives. As you can see from the definition on the screen, eudaimonia does not protect us from pain and challenge. Rather, it fortifies us to weather any storm and to see always the sunshine which lies beyond. So what is the numinous? My work in this area develops out of research that I conducted examining how religious and spiritual interests influence our lives. While spiritual issues are frequently tied to specific religious traditions, I felt there existed a need to understand these activities from a more universal, strictly psychological perspective. I was interested in knowing, what is it about us psychologically that makes religion and spirituality so important to us? In fact, religious and spiritual sentiments have been part of every culture, society, and civilization across time. These interests are also uniquely human interests. There are no animal models for religiousness. I felt that there must be something of great psychological value underlying these interests. What emerged was what I have termed the numinous. The numinous is the soul of our humanity. It is the cornerstone on which our identities are built. And it emerges from our limitless capacities to think, imagine, and reason. This psychological space provides unlimited adaptive resources for us. It is our mind and our mental functions that are the essential adaptive drivers that enable us to both survive and thrive. And thriving is the heart of the numinous. This numinous space has its own needs and drives which must be addressed. These mental forces are those that truly define us and set the foundation for our personalities. I have identified three basic numinous motivations that represent key existential issues. The numinous, when properly managed, can take us to the very heights of our ability. It enables us to fully commit our lives to important endeavors. When disrupted, these motivations can create chillingly painful existential crises that undermine our ability to be fully present to ourselves and to the world. The numinous motivations underlie the three basic existential questions, which are: one, is death the end? Number two, is there meaning to life, or is it just chaos? And number three, well, I know I'm imperfect. Am I still good enough? These are complex questions with answers that are potentially intimidating. Nonetheless, these motivations are always influencing our lives, whether we acknowledge them or not. In some ways, the numinous is like fire. If used properly, fire can heat our house and keep us warm, or if used improperly, it can burn your home down. Learning how to use the numinous effectively can have important implications for developing a broad sense of well-being. Each of these numinous motivations is associated with its own existential issue, and I will discuss each in turn. First up is infinitude, which relates to our knowledge that we are mortal creatures who will eventually pass away. This motivation creates within us a drive to give substance and continuity to our lives. We seek to create some type of durability to our efforts, a legacy that will continue to reverberate into the future. Humans are the only species that can physically change the world around us to facilitate our adaptiveness. We contribute to life and give it value through the work that we do. As nurses, your work is on the forefront of this motivation to support the vulnerable and weak through empowerment, compassion, and the easing of their suffering and pain. Patients are sick and are concerned about whether they will die or be forever immobilized or be just physically broken. Assuaging these feelings in patients helps them to address and manage their feelings of infinitude. Appreciating your role in this process can enhance your own sense of infinitude. Meaning is the second numinous motivation. Predictability is important to us. We actively seek to create such patterns to guide our lives forward. These patterns can be explicit, such as our own personal knowledge and wisdom of life. They can also be implicit, in that when we cannot explain something, we rely on culturally provided patterns to provide the meaning we cannot see. While doubt is an important mechanism that signals a need to improve our meaning-making abilities, too much doubt can crumble our meaning structures. And a life without meaning is a life not worth living. Inherent to meaning-making is a timeline associated with reaching our goals. Our research shows that when creating a meaningful plan, the longer the timeline associated with the goals of that plan, the more resilience and stability we experience psychologically. Ultimate eudaimonia is found when we begin to view our current lives as just one stage in a much larger eternal time frame. Finally, there is worthiness. While we recognize our own imperfections and failings, ultimately, each of us assesses our own worth and value within the entirety of our own meaning network. Our own personhood calls on us to make a statement of our own worth and value. We engage life to develop worthiness, and the results speak to our sense of value. There is security in feeling worthy. There's emptiness in feeling condemned. This dimension is very much associated with serious mental health issues and represents its own pathway to mental illness. Individuals who believe themselves to be rejected by the universe or the God of their understanding find themselves in a state of catastrophic alienation. After all, if God rejects you, to what court do you make appeal? Lack of worthiness has been shown to be linked to, among other things, suicide attempts and suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, and personality disorders. Worthiness seems to lie at the heart of veterans experiencing what is termed moral injury, in women with body dysphoria issues, and among substance abusers. High levels of worthiness gives us a sense of belonging and goodness that empowers us to act compassionately and completely in our life activities. Finding adaptive solutions for fulfilling these numinous motivations creates a solid foundation for building a life of overall well-being. People with strong, positive, numinous motivations become agents of change in the world, finding ways to fill important needs. As nurses, you know that patients have the same needs as us, although the health crisis they are experiencing is making these issues very salient for them. Recognizing what issue or issues are salient for a patient can help us to intervene in ways that can have powerful healing effects. Providing emotional and physical succorance, support for one's personal and psychological integrity, and renewed meaning can allow patients to better accept treatment interventions, to become more active in the healing process, and despite whatever negative outcomes may be there, to maintain an upbeat and positive outlook on life. The value of the numinous is that can help us all to gain a sense of personal closure, acceptance, and value that can allow us to accept whatever life throws in our ways. In the last few moments I would like to briefly present some techniques that can be useful in helping you attend to your numinous motivations. These can be brief reflections to ponder when you have some undisturbed free time. It will stimulate you to imagine the key existential elements in your own life. I will also discuss some themes that others may share with you that are also related to these motivations. Frequently, people will use religious themes as a way of expressing their anxieties around the numinous. While you cannot be expected to address these concerns from a religious or theological perspective, you can do so from a numinous sensitivity. Each technique will relate to a particular numinous motivation. Remember, the key is to help people and yourself to see their lives from a different perspective, seeing new possibilities, new ways of thinking about things, all help to slowly transform people into new creations. First up is infinitude. Our lives are, in general, brief experiences in this material world. The universe is over 13 billion years old, but no matter how long we may live, even past 100 years, it is nothing but a split second when compared to the age of the universe. The metaphor that can help start a personal exploration of this issue is throwing a stone into a lake. When a pebble is tossed into a lake, it quickly goes in and sinks to the bottom, probably never to be seen on dry land again. However, the ripples caused by the stone hitting the surface continue to move outwards and to influence the rest of the lake. While our lives may be short, our actions continue to reverberate long into the future. We're all part of a social network that extends into the future. We all influence others, who in turn continue to express our ideas to those that these people meet. Our lives do make a difference. Our actions not only speak louder than words, but also last longer than any spoken sentence. Think about how the work you do makes a difference in the lives of so many. In speaking with others, we can listen for their infinitude concerns. Conversations around themes of fear of death, miracles, resurrection, growth, and mourning are some themes that reflect this issue. When you hear them, throw your stone. Meaning is also a very key aspect of our lives. It gives focus, direction, and vitality. We are creatures who love patterns and regularities. We all create a system of meaning that helps direct us through life. As noted earlier, the longer the time range associated with our meanings, the more resilience and stability we experience in our lives. But our meaning systems, ultimately, need to be of our own creation, reflecting those issues that are most important to ourselves. Having a useful meaning system is essential to eudaimonia, but we should always be working to expand, develop, and improve our systems of belief and meaning. Our meaning systems are like the operating systems on our laptops or iPhones. These programs allow us to do all the things that we like. But notice, while your device may stay the same, as your operating system improves, the device gets more powerful. Similarly, while we cannot change our physical realities, improving our psychological operating system makes us better. Always think about expanding your operating system, especially including more apps for connecting with others in your lives. Meaning issues can be seen in others whose concerns center on issues of faith, grief and loss, disillusionment, sacrifice, and morality. Finally, there is worthiness. This dimension has many direct implications for overall eudaimonia, mental health, and physical coping. Individuals suffering from worthiness experience profound emptiness, shame, and emotional dysphoria. Working with such patients can be quite challenging. It's hard to get them to accept good things about themselves, but that is the key to managing this issue. Despite whatever perceived or actual wrongdoings, flaws, mistakes, or bad things patients or ourselves may believe to have committed, we all need to recognize that deep down, we're all good. We need to work with patients and ourselves to see even the smallest good thing that we do, and then expand from that action to other related ones that eventually result in a web of goodness. Doing this requires taking small steps, but showing others and ourselves respect, kindness, and personal warmth are the keys for beginning this process. You can be the one person who does see something positive and hopeful in someone's character. It is a small, easy step to take, but a powerful one. Some themes that are related to worthiness are feelings of alienation, guilt, redemption, mercy, and sin. Well, I want to thank everyone for your attention. I hope that you can now understand why the numinous is an important aspect of who we are as human beings and occupies the most intimate aspect of our humanity. When we reflect on our own numinous strivings or reach out to talk with someone about their numinous orientation, realize that you are having an experience that is perhaps the most intimate activity with which one can be involved. Nursing is a demanding field, not just physically, but psychologically as well. A focus on the numinous can help transform each of us and enable us to experience life with greater fullness, wonder, and authenticity. Take the time to develop your numinous heart. Take the time to inspire others to do the same. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Dr. Ralph.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ralph. And I just want to remind you that at the end, we're also going to have a section of Q&A. And so we want to kindly ask everyone to not forget to just write them in the chat, and later on, our panelists will be able to answer them before the end of it with questions and answers. So I just also want to make the most to be able to thank everyone who's connecting them and just greet all those people from Peru. We're seeing certain connections from Peru and also from Mexico, and of course from Guatemala and from many other nations throughout Latin America. And we must not forget all the way from the USA. So thank you very much. Once again, thank you for your contributions, Dr. Ralph. We really appreciate it. Those reflections that Dr. Ralph highlighted and stressed. And now we want to invite once again everyone to send your questions, and we will be responding all of your doubts shortly. And before going on, we're going to have a 30-second break with this video concerning EBLA Digital. And this morning, we've set the framework about the challenges being faced in the nursing field today. A few minutes ago, we heard about the mental health and wellness to be able to improve patient care and the ripple effect that it has on the family, the community, and our society. But now we're going to learn even more about some of the technological advances that can help strengthen nursing and education through virtual care. Next, I'd like to welcome Mr. Brian Hamilton, a well-known pioneer and wide renowned leader in the technology industry, particularly in the area of augmented and virtual reality tools in the fields of healthcare and education. He's currently the president and founder of Hippo Technology, Inc. Brian, welcome, and the time is yours.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, if I may. So I'm going to actually do a live demo today. And so bear with me. We're actually going to show you some of the technology that we're applying for virtual care in nursing. Before I begin this presentation, I just want to thank Mildred and EBLA and everybody from Latin America for allowing us this platform to be able to come and be with you today. This last year has been very, very difficult for many nations and many people. And at the end of the day, I want to also especially thank all the clinicians that are listening, that are in the audience today. You know, I wanted to begin the presentation with a quote that nurses are like icebergs. At any one time, you only see what they're actually doing. And over the last year, we've worked with countless nurses, doctors, nurses' aides, frontline clinicians. And it has been, there's a lot of people that have made a tremendous sacrifice in the last year. So my name is Brian Hamilton. I've been in the technology and wearable sector for many, many years. I'll talk more about what's on my head in a moment. We've been over the last year, we've actually been rolling headsets out and virtual or augmented reality and wearables to the front lines of the pandemic to help nurses with and clinicians with being able to have access to global knowledge networks, to be able to support more activity, to be able to protect against the lack of personal protective equipment during the height of COVID. Our story actually began pre-pandemic. In 2019, I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Pat Quinlan, the former CEO of Ochsner Health in New Orleans, Louisiana. And Dr. Quinlan and I connected with a gentleman in Nigeria and went over to Nigeria and actually started rolling out these headsets to figure out how we can support clinicians on the front line in use cases such as virtual rounding when you're seeing patients, virtual consultation where you need support, virtual proctoring where we're overseeing procedures, as well as virtual education. Came back to the United States after that trip, not knowing that a pandemic of once in a lifetime, hopefully, was upon us. So when the pandemic broke in Wuhan, China, we actually were on the front lines supporting that work in China as well. So we were supporting about 20 hospitals, 24 hospitals in the Wuhan, China region, because people didn't have enough personal protective equipment. So we actually took these devices, put them on the doctors, the nurses, and the clinicians who were going into the ICU wards. And the people that were treating the patients now could be sitting in their homes or in another part of the hospital, so they weren't exposed. And so we were working to help support these clinicians when personal protective equipment was at an all-time high in terms of demand, and also to limit exposures. We then went to the United States with our next set of rollouts. We started at Johns Hopkins Suburban Hospital, where one of the use cases that we implemented with these headsets was to support being able to bring patients' families and their loved ones into the hospital during COVID when they couldn't be able to get access to their loved ones. So in that use case, many people were calling the hospital. They wanted to hear how their loved one was doing. So you could take one of these headsets and put basically the doctor or the family in the headset so they could see their loved one. We then went on to the Nordics over in Europe. And then we actually started working with some of the largest nursing schools in the United States. More on that later. And we've been very, very heavily in education. We've actually done work in Latin America. We've done work with medical device companies that have actually proctored cases from Colombia, South America. And we had doctors in Colombia and nurses in Colombia working with doctors and other clinicians in Scotland, Japan, Germany, and the United States all at the same time via this technology. So when we think about the shortages and the challenges that are in nursing, there's a tremendous opportunity now to build a knowledge network and utilize these technologies in a very unique framework. So let me start by talking about global trends in nursing. As many of you know, if you're studying or you are currently active as a healthcare professional, the last year has been tremendously difficult. There's a high degree of burnout. In fact, over 22% of nurses, and this is from McKinsey related in the US, that over 22% of the nurses are potentially going to leave direct patient care in the next 12 months. So if you think about that, the nurse's role has never been more important. And there's a global shortage of 5.9 million nurses right now, which is probably only going to get greater as time goes on. So the work you're doing in this profession, if you are related to doing nursing work, is absolutely critical and mission critical and so needed and so important. So we're trying to look at new ways to bring technology and different forms of virtual care to the front lines to help people be able to get access to the people that need our healthcare, the most healthcare that they need. So basically getting the people that are most at risk healthcare. Also, if you're in the nursing profession and healthcare profession, you know that you're expecting more and more support from the organizations that employ you or that you're working with, because you have so many demands on your time. You have a personal life away from being a nurse or a clinician. You have to keep a good, you heard Dr. Piedmont's presentation, you'll hear from Aaron in a few minutes, health, wellness, and mental health, being able to keep yourself healthy through the process of healing others is very, very critical. There's an increased availability of resources that are needed in the mental health field. More on that later. I don't want to take away the thunder from the next presentation, but mental health resources are very critical. Telemedicine and virtual care is here to stay. So we've been able to look at, take the United States for a minute, there's 625 hours to become a nurse. Now over 50% of that work can be done online and done virtually. So telemedicine is here to stay. The one thing the pandemic did do for healthcare was it gave the healthcare as a global, it gave healthcare a globalization opportunity where people could work together and people could think about new ways to disrupt healthcare because we were in crisis mode. We already talked about demand being at an all-time high, and talent is definitely, there's gaps in talent, and we need to train the next generation of nursing, and we need to make sure that nursing continues to be the rewarding profession and something that's very viable. And there's also new professional development and pathways for training and tooling. So what's going on in Latin America? Latin America actually, I'll talk more about this at the end of the presentation, actually has a unique opportunity to be one of the leaders, the global leaders in the way that healthcare change and virtual care can occur because of a variety of formats. Number one, the healthcare there's so many different countries and different gaps between the countries that there's an opportunity to actually learn and have many different types of implementations of technology and customize those solutions on a country by country basis. I'll talk more about that later. But in Latin America right now, there's a significant shortage of nurses with bachelor degrees. There's a large part of the working nursing force is auxiliary nurses and nursing aides, and people that are out on the front lines that may need support from others as they encounter large groups of populations of people that need support and help, as well as unique specialty cases. So being able to think differently about a knowledge network and be able to bring things that are cost effective and actually help people get more care, more scalability, better care, like different technologies on the front lines is absolutely mission critical as we globalize medical healthcare and knowledge. COVID in Latin America also has disrupted many supply chains. So it's destabilized economies globally. That's not just Latin America. So there's a lot of scarcity in things that are needed and required. MRI machines, shortage in Latin America overall, for example. So there's a lot of different types of tools and items that need to be that you need more of in Latin America. So being able to bring people in and bring resources in is very, very important. The demand side of healthcare is way overloaded. We all know that. The ability to train and upskill our nursing populations, never been more important than it is in Latin America today. And then last but not least, the ability to globalize medicine and be able to have a global support network to provide basically on-demand expertise anywhere you need it at any different time. I'm going to give you two stats on Latin America. The average number of physicians per 1,000 people in Latin American countries is only 2. And OECD countries in Europe and Mexico, it's 3.52. And the average number of nurses per 1,000 people in Latin American countries is less than 3 with an OECD average of 9. So what that means is that there needs to be more people available to help the frontline workers and the frontline healthcare workers in Latin America and beyond. But Latin America, there's so much opportunity, and I'll talk more about that later. How mobile technology and what I have on my head, which I'll explain in a second, can actually help people. You can be able to bring people in for create a workforce multiplier, where you're able to bring people in to different experiences and support clinicians. The ability to take mobility and connectivity, which is another major function of success for the future of healthcare, is being able to be connected to the internet, to a phone, and the ability to actually eliminate geographic barriers, no matter where you are. If you're in a village or you're in a rural area, I know in Guatemala, for example, talking to Mildred, that many people in Guatemala come to the major cities and the major hubs for their healthcare, and they're coming long distances. They're traveling. There's geographic challenges to that. There's challenges at the healthcare facility because many people come at many times. Imagine an opportunity in a future through virtual care where the people don't have to travel except for the most severe cases. Basically, you can keep people where they are to give them the care they need at the point of care, regardless of their geographic location. And then last but not least is the ability to deliver a virtual knowledge network so that people all around the world, there's doctors from Colombia and Mexico and Argentina and Brazil, and we've met all the different countries that we've been involved in all over the world. So there's doctors in the UK, there's doctors in the US that have either going to be coming back to their countries to support their countries, or they're practicing in another country. So imagine a world where you can actually have access to a large group of people that care about their country, but they just happen to not be living there, that would like to provide clinical support to that. That's what these types of technologies can support. So let me talk about what's on my head and actually give you a live demo. So if you can see me here in the picture, I've got a wearable computer system on my head, and this system has a fighter pilot display. So I actually can see a computer screen right here, just like a fighter pilot would have. I have a full computer screen. I can see my presentation, but I have a whole computer screen in front of my right eye here. I can also flip it over to my left eye as well. My left eye is my dominant eye. I've got a very, very powerful 16 megapixel high definition camera here, which basically allows a clinician anywhere in the world to come in through the headset, see what I see, help me do my work, and be able to communicate with me in real time by providing me real-time data. I have a hard drive built here where if people are going out to rural areas where they don't have access to specific connectivity at the moment, they can store libraries of best practices and learnings around healthcare on this headset. So you could go out and review how to actually do a procedure, for example. So all this on my head is a wearable computer system, which it's controlled 100% by your voice. All you do is say what you see. The device is in 17 languages, including Spanish and Portuguese, when we're talking about Latin America, and other languages. The scenario here is to be able to have people come in and be able to have an immediate one-on-one review and impact, to be able to see what I'm looking at and help me in my care. We actually did this work in refugee camps in Jordan with the Syrian refugees through a foundation where you have 6 hours to see as many patients as you can possibly see in a positive manner, and supported use cases in refugee camps. And we've also worked in hospitals and clinics and all over the world. And we'd love to also continue our mission of helping people in Latin America. So I'm going to now flip to a demo of actually showing you what this technology does. So If you bear with me for a second here, I'm going to flip over to a screen here. I'm going to first show you what it's like to be inside the headset, okay? So what you see on the screen right here is what's in my headset, and I'm going to show you a clinical experience in a second. So if I want to just say what I see on the screen, so this is, again, what is in my eyepiece. This is our platform where I can see what clinicians are available to me, where they are, and I'll show you this in a second from calling one of my colleagues. But if I want to control this headset, all I do is say, navigate home, and my screen will change, my camera. So all I'm doing is speaking. So here's my camera out my front window, my hands are up. I want to just take a photo. All I do is say, take photo, my photo is taken. I'll say preview. And now here's the photo I just took. And you can see out my rainy window, my front house. And I'll say zoom level 5, zoom level 5. And I can now move my head around as the mouse, freeze window, freeze window. So I'm now able to take photos, take videos, provide data at the time that I need it. Now I'm going to show you actually what it's like to be a clinician inside of the headset. Navigate home. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to show you my browser. So what I'm going to do now is my colleague, Alex, is actually going to be at his home. So I'm launching an event with Alex right now. So I'm going to go ahead and call his computer. Say hi, Alex, everybody. All right, so Alex is here. And what I'm seeing here in the screen is now what I've just called Alex's headset. So I'm sitting here at my home inside of the computer talking over Zoom to you. And I now can click in and actually see everything that Alex is doing as he's wearing this headset. So he's looking at, I think he's actually looking at this mannequin. He can take out the lungs. He can work on the different pieces. I can now zoom in, zoom out, control all the functions of this. So you can see it from different angles. So we have 3 profiles in our system: the person wearing a headset, the person being able to control the headset from a third-party location, like I'm doing here with Alex, as well as a participant. So it's perfect for medical schools. People can come in, you can be back in the classroom without physically being there. And you have all the controls of the headset from a third-party location. So I wanted everybody to see how first-person point of view this is, so that you can actually see that this is reality and not Star Wars or some fantasy and movie. But this is a very, very sophisticated, encrypted system, which allows us to work with the top medical institutions in the world. Thanks, Alex. I'm going to go back to my presentation now. Thank you, Alex. All right, so I'm going to come back into my presentation here. If you give me 1 second, flipping between the different presentations. So basically our platform allows you to do that. And we're looking at all different forms of virtual care to address the nursing shortages. You know, we have the ability to look at improved quality of care, some of the things that we're doing in healthcare. And this isn't just about headsets. It's about technology as a whole. It's about working with the startup communities in the Latin American countries. It's about embracing the universities and the partners and the ecosystems in the countries that want to help actually be part of the virtual care solution. But we're deploying these technologies to look at things like improved quality of care, the ability to have in place enhanced patient satisfaction, seeing more patients, the increased patient flow, being able to see more patients with less time, just-in-time service. So much in healthcare of time is wasted by people waiting around, waiting for events, scheduling events. Imagine being able to do just-in-time healthcare. When you need to make that phone call, when you need to bring that clinician in, when you need to schedule a session, just immediately at your fingertips. So you can get more done in a day and get more of your personal time back as you're supporting a large population. Reduction in cost waste. There's a tremendous amount of waste in healthcare. And the opportunity now to be able to have these systems available to you to look at cost reductions and more efficiency and better spend with that money. And then of course, increased productivity. So we'll talk briefly about this. We've actually worked very heavily in the nursing schools, and this is the case study with a holding company, the largest holding company in the United States, called Adtalem. Some of you may know this as Chamberlain or DevRye, and We've had the privilege of working alongside Telum over the last year to be able to start looking at how we get students back in the simulation labs so they can get training. We're starting to look at the student observations and faculty facilitation. So how do we get better access for people to be able to do facilitation and observation within the healthcare teaching environments, and then be able to tie this to clinical sites as well. So we spent the last year working with some of the top institutions, and we can take those learnings and apply those learnings to also be able to do the similar things in Latin America. Another case study that actually touches Mexico is because of some of the work that's been done on medical mission trips in the Yucatan, is Baylor University, which is based in Miami. It's a podiatry school. We've rolled out these devices and been able to help with streaming doctor visits, patient visits to the classroom, so you can bring the students into the classroom, medical mission trips to be able to support the people in Mexico and also into other countries in Latin America. And it's allowed our educators to be able to evaluate skills, be able to collect data, collect clinical information that's valuable to the learning experience directly from the field. So let me spend a minute on Latin America as the opportunity. I think Latin America is a really, really unique opportunity for actually leading in this space. And I'll tell you why. Nearly 25% of the world's hospitals are based in Latin America. The size of the market is magnificent, and there is so much diversity between the countries. So what that means is that getting it right in each country with each system, whatever the ratios are of nurses and doctors, but just getting it right allows us to be able to partner in Latin America with the different countries, the different health systems, to understand the challenges that are unique to the local region, whether that be getting more clinicians out on the front lines into the rural populations. This diversity inside of Latin America is an opportunity to be able to get it right at a localized level, and then be able to take those learnings and apply them so that we can have a global learning from the countries that are leading, hopefully here in Latin America. The other uniqueness that's happening right now is about the advancement of 5G and internet connectivity. It's not perfect, but we need to give tools to people to be able to be connected. You have to be connected. And in this case, you don't have to be connected with the libraries to be able to have medical libraries available to you. But we implemented our first use cases in 3G environments in Africa. But there's more and more advancement in connectivity, which is a really, really important point that's coming. And the opportunity to deliver more equality in healthcare. Equality and quality of healthcare is very critical. Getting to the right people, helping people that don't necessarily get the access that they need to healthcare in real time. Also in Latin America, there's a lot of positive movement. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of positive movement in regulatory and policy that's happening right now. And there is and we're finding a lot of Latin American countries are very forward thinking in the way that they're want to have roadmap to improvement. So Latin American countries are, and people that are living in the countries are very entrepreneurial. They like to be able to think outside the box at times, and they're embracing anything and everything to be able to help their local health systems as we're coming out of this pandemic, hopefully. So my belief is that together we can partner up and figure out how do we change the future of virtual care, not just from mobilities and headsets, but overall, what are the pieces of virtual care that need to happen? And overall, the result hopefully is saving lives, making people get better access, reducing cost, reducing waste, and just frankly making the world a better place, one country and one patient at a time. So how can you get involved? Number one, be able to connect with EBLA and Mildred, and we have a website, www.myhippo.life, and obviously hippohive.org, which is the online virtual care community that we've built up to be able to bring people together that want to be thought leaders around virtual care. I'm really honored to be here today. I want to say thank you again to Mildred. I look forward to your questions, and I hope to see you down in Latin America. I've been to Latin America developing programs already with these kinds of headsets, and appreciate all the countries and opportunity, and hopefully we can change healthcare together in the near future. Stay well, and thank you.
Brian, thank you very much for your contribution. Certainly a fascinating live demo. That was really fascinating to see. Certainly virtual care is a solution for Latin America, and certainly when we talk about healthcare. Ciertamente el cuidado virtual es una herramienta fundamental.
Certainly virtual care is a fundamental tool to strengthen healthcare, the work of health professionals, and especially nursing students. I just want to thank you, Brian Hamilton, for your awesome contributions. And don't forget that we'll be responding to your questions. So please post them in the chat. And following this last presentation, we'll be able to answer them. And now we've come to our final panelist for the special webinar. We're so pleased to be joined by Erin McClintock, Vice President of Community Engagement, Impact, and Education for EverFi. Erin leads EverFi's work in the areas of mental health, wellness, and social and emotional learning. She focuses her work from a strength-based standpoint and has a broad array of expertise in mental health, substance use prevention, violence prevention, digital wellness, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Erin McClintock is going to share 5 actionable steps for nurses that will allow us greater performance. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you so much, Mildred. I'm really happy to be here today. So, should I get started? Perfect. Hi, everyone. As Mildred said, my name is Erin McClintock, and I have the great pleasure of leading impact work at EverFi around mental health, wellness, and social emotional learning. I've been at EverFi, which is a social impact educational technology company, for 5 years. But prior to joining EverFi, I actually served as a therapist in a variety of different settings, including in the university setting, in the community setting, and in K-12 student mental health. I also have a deep appreciation for the work that you do as nurses. Both of my grandmothers were nurses, and I was raised by nurses. So I know the type of compassionate, thoughtful, and wonderful humans that it takes to do such important work. So it is through a lens of deep gratitude, as well as the lens of clinical expertise, that I'll be delivering today's session, where I'm hoping to share some actionable tactics that you can use to support your mental health, to conquer anxiety, and to hopefully set yourselves on a path to positive mental health. So the goal of this session is really to focus on you and your well-being in an actionable, tactical way. I'm going to be sharing 6 techniques that you can use when you need to. These techniques are rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, which I'll talk a little bit more about momentarily. And they're really designed for you when you're feeling acute moments of stress, when you're feeling overwhelmed, or when you're feeling anxious. I know that nurses tend to spend a lot of time taking care of other people. And so really today, the focus of these next 18 minutes or so is to focus entirely on you and equip you with some skills that you can use. I want to acknowledge up front that mental health is a topic that, even though it's highly individualized, it's not solely dependent on an individual. And so while I'll be sharing some practices that are designed to support positive mental health and to cope in moments that are challenging, they're not meant to be a replacement for systemic change. And they're not meant to be a substitute for work that you might need to dig deeper on with a professional. So while I hope that they'll be helpful for you to keep in your toolbox, I also want to encourage you to seek out help if you feel like you need it. This also includes advocacy. I've seen it come up in the chat. I've seen it echoed in our opening remarks today. And I know, as someone who's a former healthcare employee and as someone who is well connected to many nurses, that often the things that we're encouraged to do from a self-care standpoint and the space that's created to do those things can be in conflict with one another. So I also want to encourage you to think about the ways in which you can advocate, to the degree that you're able to and the degree that you feel comfortable doing so, for the systemic, the structural, and the policy changes that might need to take place to continue addressing mental health as a part of the work that we do in the healthcare field. So while today we're going to be focusing on some specific actionable strategies for moments of crisis or moments where we're feeling really stressed, I also want to emphasize the importance of putting practices in place to maintain your mental health on a daily basis. So science has found the things that you see on the screen in front of you to be effective in doing that. I'm not going to spend time talking about all of them, but there are a couple that I do want to highlight. The first one is to create a routine. So it's very likely that you already have a routine of some sort, waking up, going to work, eating meals. But there's something really powerful about actually writing down the things that you do on a daily basis. And what this can do is allow you to take stock of your time and also to see where you can build in moments to do things that bring you joy, to do things that are focused on positive mental health, or to promote things like connecting with colleagues or friends. The next one I want to highlight is this one in the middle, which is about building mindfulness into everyday moments. Many of us hear the term mindfulness and we immediately think of sitting in silence for long periods of time or being alone with our thoughts. And while for some people that might be true, mindfulness can also be in those everyday moments that we have. So this might mean having an extra sense of awareness when you're washing your hands. Thinking about what's the temperature of the water, how does the soap feel, and just taking a breath in that moment to be present with yourself. It also might mean mindful walking. So if you're going from one patient room to the next, rather than just hurrying through, really take a moment to use that walk as an opportunity to connect with yourself. Or it could be something as simple as taking a few moments to be mindful and take a few deep breaths, which we're going to talk about a little more when we get to our actionable strategies. And then the final thing that I want to highlight is the benefits of finding a support system. So this past year and a half, if it's taught us anything, it's the importance of connectedness with one another. And so whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, creating space to connect with other people can be hugely beneficial for our well-being. This might mean your family members, it might mean colleagues, it might mean friends, it might even mean talking to a professional if that's beneficial. Having people to talk with, to celebrate with, to share moments with, and to vent to can be really powerful for our well-being. Okay, so now we're going to move into some of the actionable strategies that I'm excited to share with you today. And the way that we're going to organize these first few tactics has to do with two important elements of mental health: our thoughts and our behaviors. So to illustrate this, I want to share a model which is often used in cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT. Now, CBT is rooted in the belief that our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotions are all connected. And for instance, we may have thoughts that are positive. I may think that I'm, great at something, or I might think that I'm successful, or that I might think that I'm a good friend. Those thoughts often influence our behaviors. For example, when we have positive thoughts, we may be more likely to engage in behaviors that are good for our well-being. For instance, prioritizing self-care, being active, or spending time with people that bring us joy. This leads to us feeling positive emotions like happiness, satisfaction, and confidence. However, this cycle also plays out when we're experiencing negative thoughts, behaviors, or emotions. So if we're having thoughts that aren't kind to ourselves, for instance, thinking something like, I'm not good at my job, or I always mess up, or I'm not a good friend, we may then engage in behaviors that aren't as positive. For instance, we may choose to isolate. We may choose to engage in unhealthy substance use behaviors like drinking more. We may gravitate towards people that aren't a good influence on our well-being. And then that reinforces the cycle of negative emotions, which causes us to feel sad, doubtful, nervous, anxious, and a variety of different emotions, including impacting our self-esteem. I often use the analogy of a traffic circle. So I'm based in the United States in a state called Massachusetts. And in Massachusetts, we're known for something called rotaries or traffic circles. And essentially what it is it's a circle in which traffic enters at one point, and then there are multiple opportunities to exit. Now, the goal is to get into the traffic circle, wait until it's your turn, and then find an exit to set you on a new path. But what can happen if you aren't quite sure where you're going, or if you choose not to take an exit, is that essentially you'll just find yourself driving around in circles, not going anywhere. The same can apply to the ways in which our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotions connect with one another. It can be very easy to get stuck in a cycle where our unhealthy or unkind thoughts are contributing to unhealthy or unkind behaviors, and then that can lead us to feeling not so positive emotions. Now, the key here is to find a point at which we can break this cycle. We might break it in the form of thoughts. We might break it in the form of behaviors, or we might break it in the form of doing activities that bring us joy. And so today we're going to focus on two. We're going to focus on thoughts and we're going to focus on behaviors and some specific techniques that you can use to break the cycle if you find yourself in it. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to start with thought techniques. And I'm going to introduce you to three. Now, as we're discussing these, I encourage you to try them in the moment, but also take notes. This is going to be available via recording. And I want to acknowledge that these techniques can also be helpful in supporting others in our lives. So if you're a parent, these might be helpful to teach your kids. It might be helpful to teach a partner, friends, colleagues, anyone who you notice might be engaging in either unkind thoughts or unhealthy behaviors. Okay, so the first technique that I want to introduce you to is the practice of putting our thoughts on trial. Now, one of the things that thoughts can often do that can be kind of tricky is that sometimes we automatically accept our thoughts as truth. I thought this thing, so it must be true. So if, for instance, if I get critical feedback from a supervisor, or if a patient sends a nasty email or says something rude about my practice, it can be far too easy for me to internalize that and let that experience consume space in my mind by accepting it as truth. Now, going back to our cycle, what that can often do is it can lead to negative emotions, which can then lead us to engaging in behaviors that aren't as productive to our well-being. So this particular technique involves the process of isolating a specific thought that you might have. So here's an example. Say you're giving a presentation and you flop, you make a mistake or you mess up. Your automatic thought might be to say, well, I'm not good at public speaking. Now, this is called an all or nothing thought, and it's a thought that if we're going through the cycle of behaviors or emotions, may lead you to then avoid opportunities to public speak in the future, lead to increased stress or anxiety when you're in the situation where you have to speak in public. And for many of us, that's an important part of our advancement in our careers. So once we've isolated the thought as, okay, I'm having this thought of I'm not good at public speaking, we then take steps to put that thought on trial. We want to imagine that this thought is being put in front of a jury and that you're on the side of the aisle where you have to dispute why that thought might not be true. So you use evidence. You think about experiences that you've had in the past where you've done public speaking, where maybe you've gotten good feedback, or where you've been asked to share your perspective, or when you felt comfortable and confident and thought you did a good job. And what this allows us to do is to create space both to remind us of positives, but also to move away from that all or nothing thinking and reframe our thoughts in a way that might be more kind to ourselves and also in a way that's rooted more in reality. So now if I've gone through that exercise and I've put that thought of, I'm not good at public speaking on trial, maybe for some of us it moves from, I'm not good at public speaking to, I messed up this time, but I've done well in the past and I can do it again. Okay. Now, the next thought technique that I want to introduce you to is called the think technique. And this involves something called self-talk. Self-talk is the way that we communicate with ourselves. It's the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are, about how things happen to us. And it's the thoughts that we have in our head that are really the makings of how we build self-esteem and self-confidence. Now, hopefully, most of the time, the ways that we communicate with ourselves are the same way that we'd communicate with a friend or with a patient or with a colleague who we care about. But sometimes the way we communicate with ourselves, and this is true for many, can be in a way that is almost like we're our biggest critic. So the next time you find yourself ruminating on a thought or spending a lot of time thinking about something, whether it's something that you did that you're playing over and over again or belief that you hold about yourself, I want you to pause, to stop, and to go through the exercise of asking yourself these 5 questions. Is this thought true? Is this thought that I'm having helpful? Is the thought or perspective that I'm having inspiring? Is the thought or perspective that I'm having necessary? And is it kind? And then if it's none of those things, think about how you can reframe it to be these things, right? And if there's difficulty in reframing that thought, what behavior can you engage in that can help you cultivate positive emotions? Really thinking about, if a friend was saying this to me, what would I tell them? And speak to yourselves in the same way that you'd speak to a friend. Okay, so the next technique is great for both breaking a thought cycle and for changing behavior. And so this is the 4 questions technique, and it involves simply asking yourself 4 questions when you're in a state of an emotion where you're feeling frustrated or upset or angry. I want to put a sort of caveat to this to say that there are times when it is perfectly okay and acceptable to just sit with negative emotions, just sit with our sadness, sit with our feelings of frustration. And that can actually be something that's very therapeutic. So these exercises are not to say that we should be taking our emotions and just trying to disregard them completely. However, if you find yourself in a situation where you're experiencing an emotion that you want to try not to experience anymore, and if you're looking for a pathway to focus on something else, this technique can be really helpful. So this technique involves asking 4 questions. The first is, why am I feeling this way? The second is there a quick fix? The third is, if so, what? And then you do it. And then the fourth is, what can I do to feel better right now? So I'll give you an example. Perhaps I'm feeling upset and I'm frustrated and I'm kind of grouchy and I want to just get out of that space. And so I ask myself, why am I feeling this way? And when I do that, I realize, well, I'm feeling this way because I asked my partner to unload the dishwasher and they still haven't done it. So then I'd move to the next question and say, is there a quick fix? If so, what? Well, yes, the quick fix is that I could talk to my partner and let them know how I'm feeling. It might not make things better instantly, but it's at least moving in the direction of doing something to address whatever it is that's causing you frustration. Now, obviously, it's not always that easy. And sometimes our emotions are more complicated in the sense that there might be a lot of things that are building up that are contributing to why we're feeling a certain way. And so that's when question number 4 comes in, and it's going to move us into our behavioral activities, which is, why am I feeling this way? Give myself a chance to process whatever it is that I'm feeling and at least acknowledge that I'm having an emotion. And then maybe there isn't a quick fix, so I can't do it. But can I do something right now to at least try to feel better? It's not going to solve the problem necessarily. It's not going to be a miracle cure. But what it will do is get me on a path to where I'm focusing on something that brings me joy, happiness, or a sense of calm, and taking one step on a pathway to prioritizing self-care. Okay, so now that we've covered 3 cognitive restructuring techniques, we're now going to introduce 3 behaviorally focused techniques. These are techniques that are designed to create an opportunity to engage in a positive behavior, which can directly connect to both our thoughts and our emotions. So the first technique is one that's called a grounding technique. And all of the techniques that I'm about to teach you, I love because they can be done pretty much anywhere. So this is a technique, a grounding technique is something that can be helpful where we feel moments of increased anxiety, where we feel that internal sense of panic or stress rising up, and when we need to just take a moment to cool off or cultivate more energy. So this technique is called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And I find this to be a technique that's really effective in public settings. This is one that maybe if you've just left a challenging encounter with a patient, or if you're in a meeting and you find yourself needing to distract, if you're not speaking in that meeting, if you find yourself needing to just break away from the meeting for a moment, or even if you need to step into a different room to take a break, this technique can be really helpful. And it involves the 5 senses. And so what you want to do is when you're in a room, wherever you're seated, and you can even try this right now if you'd like, is to scan the room and look to identify first 5 things that you can see. So you might look around your room and actively think about and label in your brain, what are 5 things that you can see? Maybe you see a door, maybe you see a window, maybe you see a crack in the ceiling. Then once you've identified 5 things that you can see, you move down to think about 4 things that you can touch. So maybe you have a desk in front of you and think about, is the desk hard? Is it soft? Is it warm? Is it cold? You might have pants that you feel, are they soft? Is it denim? Once you've identified 4 things you can touch, you then move into 3 things you can hear. So this involves you being silent and really focusing on that, cultivating that sense of hearing, moving down to 2 things you can smell, and then finally 1 thing you can taste. So maybe you're having a glass of water and you're tasting, is it cold? Is it, you have a soda, you can feel it, bubbling in your mouth. This is a technique that can be really helpful, not just for you, but also potentially to teach to patients. If you have a patient who's feeling really overwhelmed and, you have the space to potentially distract them, this could be something to introduce them to. This is helpful in that it forces us into a state of mindfulness and it distracts us from whatever negative emotion we might be experiencing in a moment, giving us a break to pause and then refocus into whatever environment we have to go into after. So the next technique that I want to teach is called box breathing. And again, this is one that I love because it can be done absolutely anywhere. I've actually done this a couple of times throughout today's webinar because I find that it's just a really centering and calming activity to do. And so this is actually a technique that was developed by the Navy SEALs. And it was used to help them specifically in moments of high stress or high anxiety moments, regulate their breathing. And so As I said, the technique is called box breathing, and you see the depiction of it on the screen here, and I'd love to invite you to do it with me in this moment. So this is a technique that you can use in a meeting, you can use when you're doing your rounds, you can use when you're stuck in traffic, really anywhere and everywhere that you might experience stress, not just stress, but even just needing to connect with your body. So if you can imagine that your breathing is a box, like the one you see on the screen, the first thing you're going to want to do is take a deep breath in, and you're going to hold it for a count of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you're going to let it out slowly for a count of 4. You're going to breathe again for a count of 4 and breathe again for a count of 4. And in your mind, what you can do as you're doing this activity is actually envision a box to help you think about it. Now, most of you are probably aware as medical professionals that deep breathing is directly connected with our physiology, and that it actually gives us the perception of lowering our heart rate. So if you think about moments when you're feeling really stressed out or really anxious, one of the things that often happens is your heart starts to beat a little bit faster. And this is for people who experience panic attacks. One of the things that is one of the biggest triggers is that they feel like they're having a heart attack because they're breathing so rapidly and their heart's beating so quickly. So what this technique does is it allows us to disrupt that by really just focusing on the breath, filling our lungs, which is naturally going to help lower our heart rate. So whether it's a moment where you really just need to take a break or take a deep breath, or if you're simply outside walking and want to appreciate being one with your breath, this is a fantastic exercise to use. And the final technique I want to share with you is something that can be done in advance of stressful situations as part of our overall daily practices. And this is the technique of scheduling positive activities. So you might remember in the beginning, I talked about the importance of developing a schedule, and this is something that can complement that really well. So this technique is really focused on the development of a positive activity idea bank. I've started one for you at the bottom of the screen. And what this is really just writing down a list of all of the different things that you can do for yourself that bring you a sense of joy or a sense of calm. For some of us, that might be stretching. For some of us, it might mean taking some deep breaths. It might be reading, watching TV, listening to music, dancing, cooking. The list goes on. And so what you want to do is sit down with yourself and spend some time, you can even do it right now if you'd like, writing down some of those things that bring you joy and fulfillment. And then using the bank at the top, think about how long each activity takes. So how much time exercising would I need to do to feel like I am fulfilled? How long would it take for me to take a few deep breaths? Then once you've identified how long each thing takes, you can start to populate this idea bank with, okay, in 5 minutes, I could do these things for myself. In 10 minutes, I could do these things. 15 minutes, I could do these things. And then this can work 2 ways. One thing you might do is take a look at your daily schedule and figure out where within your daily schedule you have pockets of time that you could build in some of these activities. Or, for instance, if you're going back to the activity with the 4 questions, you could save this list for when you're in number 4 and you need to focus on doing something right now and think about how much time you have and which activity you could do. But keeping this activity bank going not only gives you something to look forward to, but it deliberately allows you space to tend to your well-being. So that brings us to the closing of our tactical activities for today. 20 minutes is not a long time, and so I realized that we really flew through them. And there were many more that I could have shared with you, but I hope that this was a good start. And I hope that you find these to be helpful and effective for you. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's not about having these techniques completely fix whatever might be going on for you, but it is about actively being mindful of how you're doing, what you're doing, and how you're thinking or perceiving yourself, and then taking steps in a positive direction from there. You are worth it. You deserve it. In the event that you'd like to benefit from the support of a professional, I strongly encourage you to take it. And I also encourage you to check out the Hippo Hive platform, which we at Everfi are really happy to have partnered with Hippo on, where you'll find not just these techniques, but many, many more focused on all aspects of your well-being. So Mildred, thank you for letting me be here today, and really appreciate all that you all do for the world.
Erin, thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful, actionable items you gave us. In fact, as you were doing the box breathing, I actually did it myself as well. And I can tell you I felt much better already. These are stressful moments, but certainly also producing and putting together a webinar with such panelists, it also stresses us. So thank you very much for sharing those actionable items that I think that we can all do, and they're very useful. So we're going to move into the Q&A section. These are all have been wonderful presentations since this morning. And so I'm going to take a moment now, and we're going to bring in all our panelists, and we're going to start answering some of these questions. So let me go ahead and get to the first question. I'm actually going to say it in English, but I am going to ask Karen Dubon to be the first one to respond. And so this question actually is coming from, and I'm looking at here, from Brian David Castillo Palacios. Gracias por su pregunta. And his question basically is, can technology affect the dehumanization of nursing care? Y esa pregunta la quiero hacer para la licenciada Karen Dubon. Esa es una pregunta que viene de uno de nuestros.
And this is a question that comes from one of our participants.
De los cuidados de la enfermedad.
Can technology affect the dehumanization? With what you saw through what you showed us today with Brian Hamilton, with virtual care, what do you believe, do you consider, and I asked Ms. Karen Dubon because she was a nurse for over 28 years. So what do you believe? Do you believe that technology can actually dehumanize patient care and nursing? Well, I believe that that's a myth or a taboo. It's a question of focus, as I mentioned before in my presentation. No, technology is something we need to make the most of. We need to leverage it as a tool, because it's not a methodology. It's actually a tool to be able to dedicate more time towards our nursing activities. For example, if we were to use technology, instead of having to write down in a clinical file so many things that I have to manage, in the health sector, there's a lot of technology that I could just use voice activation and it'll record all the information. Then I can dedicate more time towards what no one else can do, which is to assist patients, care for them, talk with them. So I believe that there's no relationship between technology and dehumanization. On the contrary, technology is something we need to make the most of in order to be able to free our programs and our agenda from many bureaucratic activities. And we need to leverage it and use it as a challenge, as an opportunity, because we are all so distant here in Guatemala from achieving many of the changes that we need to have through technology. But it's very important to be able to work on it at an individual level, in our guilds, in our professional level, and especially at a governmental level. Thank you so much, Licenciada.
Ask you the same question, because you've had the opportunity, as you mentioned in your presentation today, to travel around different countries. You've used the technology. You've seen virtual care in action, and as a solution. And so what is your response to this question? Can technology affect the dehumanization of nursing care? What do you think?
I think it's a really great question. I'm glad it was asked, because change is sometimes fearful, right? There's change, that people are fearful of change and different things. And part of being a good clinician is also not just getting diagnoses right, but also having bedside manner, showing care, showing empathy for the human race and for people that you're with. So I've been in over 50 countries implementing this technology, and psychology is really critical. We've been in places where there's a lot of women population, where you have to address different hairstyles and ways that you wear the device. Psychology is a part of this. What we've found is that it provides exactly what was just said. It provides more time to the clinician to be focused on the outcome and working with the patient. It's not meant for the entire procedure or process. It's meant as a tool, like what was just stated, to help support that program. So understanding the psychology of these technologies is really, really critical, and implementing them the right way with PPE. For example, when we were in the Middle East, people wearing traditional Arab attire in these devices, or if you're out in the field and you're in a specific area with specific type of equipment that you have on, you have to take into all these considerations that have nothing to do with technology. One story I'll share in Nigeria was one of my favorite stories since we started the company. This woman was getting ready to go into surgery, and they were going to do proctoring with the surgery. And so she's literally on the gurney getting ready to go into surgery. And the doctor came around. I was with the doctor, and the doctor comes around and says to her, hey, we're gonna show you this technology real fast. He actually showed her the technology, and her response was, wow, that's amazing. Can I try it? So this woman's getting ready to go into surgery with a big smile on her face, because once you experience this, you have to experience it first person. So I think it's not made for all situations, and you have to take control of the psychology, and you have to remain human in medicine. And that question is very well thought out. I appreciate it very much.
And of course, I hadn't thought about the fact that we do have to, as women, in nursing, there are a lot of women, care about how we look. So that's important as well. But absolutely what you mentioned in terms of culture, it is a cultural change. And it is something that we have to work with, particularly in our countries. So thank you for your answer. And the next question, I'd like to address it with both of our panelists, Dr. Ralph Piedmont and also Aaron. How to manage stress and fear when circumstances are as difficult as the current pandemic. This certainly, we know it's been a global issue. I'm sure this is not the first time you hear of these effects, and certainly how to manage that stress level. So I'd like to go with Dr. Ralph Piedmont to get your sense, your opinion on the question, and then I'd like to go to Erin, who I'm sure has worked through this, and that's the reason why she also has developed the actionable items as well. So Dr. Ralph Piedmont, what are your thoughts?
You're up, sir.
I didn't hear a question.
I'll go ahead and, so one of
I can't hear.
can you hear us?
I don't hear Mildred.
Okay. Perhaps if you can.
Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't hear Mildred.
A mí sí me.
Okay. Si puedes, Elmer, repetirle la pregunta al doctor Piedmont.
So then here's the question, Dr. Friedman.
Yes. I don't hear anything now.
I'm about to ask you the question. I'm asking you to repeat it.
While we're going through this, let me go ahead and with Aaron, and then we're working through those audio issues with Dr. Piedmont.
Okay, so they're just going to fix the other issues, and we're going to ask Aaron right now. Okay.
Okay. For the stress factor that most of our health professionals have gone through, and the fear when circumstances are as difficult as the pandemic.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question around how do we cope with stress in the midst of a pandemic and anxiety, and what are some tactics for doing that? I think it's important to acknowledge, and I'd love your thoughts on this too, Dr. Piedmont, the fact that stress can exist on a continuum. And so there are some times when we experience stress that it motivates us. It helps us do the things we have to do and get done. But we can reach a point, and I think this is where a lot of us are at as a society, where we are collectively experiencing a trauma. And there's evidence to suggest that the effects of such a trauma as we have experienced on a global scale can last up to 18 months and longer. So I think it's important that this is a question that is not just dependent on the individual, but the systems that we are a part of. I think this ties into another question that came up around resources that our workplaces have for nurses, right, around mental health and wellness. I think it is recognizing when we might benefit from seeking out help from a professional. And I think it's also the shared nature of the fact that we aren't alone in this. And a lot of us are experiencing high levels of stress, high levels of anxiety. Some of the causes of that might be things that will hopefully change in the near future, but some of it might not. And so it's really important to recognize where you might be at as an individual and put in place those things that you know can help bring you stress relief. And then if those aren't effective, looking at what other things in your life do you have control over and what don't you have control over, and identifying pathways for seeking out support where it's needed. One thing I will say that I think has been beneficial as a result of the pandemic is that mental health is coming more to the forefront. We are seeing more people that are open to talking about it. We are seeing more leaders that are open to talking about it. And we're seeing some of the barriers to resources go away a little bit. And so I hope that that's something that we carry into the future, because if the research that we've been doing at EverFi and that I've been following in the field is any indication, there are a lot of people that are struggling right now. So Dr. Piedmont, I'd welcome you to pick up where I left
Dr.
off.
Piedmont, please. Yes, by all
Yes,
means,
thank
sir.
you, Erin. I appreciate that. I think it's moments like this that really give pause to our life. There's a lot going on in the pandemic. And the most important and more immediate things we need to do is to address the conflicts and stresses that we're experiencing. Erin gave a great little overview of things that you can do in the here and now to help manage the direct stress and anxiety you may be experiencing. And if you can reach out for help, don't hesitate to do that. It's times like this where we need to look after ourselves and find the necessary personal and social resources to manage the stress that we're directly confronting. From my perspective, though, there's also a larger issue here as well. The pandemic really does directly access the key existential issues in our lives. Here in the United States, over 500,000 people have died from the COVID virus. That's more people than died in World War II in our armies. Everybody in this country knows at least one person, and I know several, unfortunately, who have died from the COVID virus. This really gives us time to pause and to really think about, who are we? What is this? Again, infinitude speaks to the fact that we are mortal beings and can die at any time. There's a whole field in psychology called terror management, which is how we manage the idea that we are mortal creatures and may die. We have to take time. And the point of my talk is that we have to think about the big picture of our lives. We as individuals need to address these existential issues about our mortality, about the meanings that we've created in life. And COVID has certainly interrupted a lot of people's meaning plans. And we also need to consider our sense of worthiness as well. Is this something we brought on ourselves? Have I done something wrong? These are the issues that are the central part of our humanity, that a moment like this, the COVID virus, really gives us the opportunity to stop and directly deal with these issues. Because at the end of the day, what we need to do is that we need to create for ourselves that resilient lifestyle. As I gave in my definition of eudaimonia, eudaimonia doesn't protect us from pain. Having a resilient lifestyle isn't going to stop illness or tragedy or conflict from coming into our life. But what it does, it helps us to productively manage these crises and challenges. We can weather the storm and we can see the sunrise that's looming over the horizon. That's what the Numinous does. It's creating this sense of personal coherence and personal integration that enables me to productively get into this, weather the storm, and to come out with more positive growth as a result. Rather than being humbled, we can stand tall.
Dr. Rao, thank you very much for inspiring us again, and also for your contributions.
Thank
So
you.
the next question I have is for Brian, and the question is, how do you think we can incorporate technology into health services in countries where there are no developments, such as in Guatemala? What are your thoughts, Brian?
Absolutely. So that's a wonderful question. And, frankly, what we want to do is, this is not just about commercial enterprise. This is about changing the world and helping people and giving people equality in healthcare. I know that's a very big and lofty goal. I think there's a lot of organizations, NGOs and charity organizations around the world that want to help. They want to help everybody be more successful in healthcare. So one of the opportunities here is a couple different ways to think about countries like Guatemala and other countries. Number one, we can align with some of the charitable communities to support the local partners. We have something called the HIPPO Global Health Initiative, which we're talking to some of the big charities that are out there. We're looking for the charities that we want to partner with, so that we can have clinicians sponsored in the countries with these types of technologies to be able to come out and do the work. So this doesn't have to be a commercial scenario every time. It can be a nonprofit scenario. Also, the opportunity to affect healthcare at a country level. If you take a look at the government spend, and it takes time. Governments take time to make decisions and to implement things and do due diligence. But there's an opportunity now, if you can just prove it out on a very small level, just work with the Guatemalan Health Ministry and just prove it out. Even if it's just 5 cases that you show that by doing technology integration, it's not about the cost, it's about what can be sponsored for the betterment of the society, and allowing everybody to be part of that win for bringing that technology forward. So also the opportunity I think exists where there's a lot of clinicians that want to support their countries. They may be living in a foreign country and they'd be more than happy to donate their time also to work with the clinicians that are on the ground in those countries. Last but not least, education. Education is critical because we want to be able to have universities and organizations work alongside us to teach and to find the next generation of entrepreneurs and people that want to contribute.
Those last thoughts from Brian Hamilton. I'd like to just ask each and every one of you to give us some last thoughts before we go off from this webinar that has been fascinating with great presentations and a lot of great information for nurses and clinicians and all the health professionals that joined us this morning. Last thoughts from you, Erin.
My last thoughts are those of gratitude. I know that the work you do is incredibly important and has also been really difficult this year. So I hope that you continue to take care of yourselves so that you can take care of others in the way that you are so good at doing and need to do. I also want to, again, highlight the importance of advocating for systemic change. I think we as individuals can only do so much, but we as communities can do a whole lot. So the more opportunities you have to be an advocate, the better.
Thank you. Doctora, licenciada Karen Dubon, unos últimos pensamientos antes.
Just some closing ideas to wrap up this webinar. Well, first of all, honestly, I just want to invite everyone and invite every nursing student, all of our colleagues and peers that are connected to work together in these challenges, to embrace them, to push them forward. First of all, at an individual level, what things can we do personally to enhance and embrace these, corporately and in guilds, with associations, with the schools of nursing that can, and associations of nursing to be able to inform us with these dynamics and public policy, to exercise leadership, empowerment, and to be able to show the capacity, the inherent capacity that we have, because nursing, as we always said, is the backbone of any health system in any country, regardless of the part of the world that you live in. Dr. Ralph Fiedman, please. You got to turn your mic. Yes. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, nursing is an absolutely critical aspect of the healthcare environment. It's where, as they say in the United States, where the rubber meets the road in terms of healthcare. Nurses provide the direct face of support and care for patients today. They have an indispensable role to play. I think the technology that Hippo provides is not going to dehumanize, but becomes more inclusive. We can bring more professionals into any particular case or process and give that patient the very best care that's available today. But my recommendation for nursing in general, don't forget the professionalization of your field. You have a voice and you need to express that voice, both through your professional organizations, your guild structures, but also in the scientific research as well. It's important for nurses to stand up and begin to evaluate the quality of their practice, the factors that either facilitate the implementation of healthcare or are getting in the way of that implementation. And you do that by doing good scientific research, by writing papers and publishing them in your leading journals. That gets out to people. It gets out to your civic leaders, it gets out to your fellow healthcare professionals, and it gets out to the general public as well. People recognize the value of nurses, but they need to hear your voice and the issues that you're experiencing directly. And you can do that in the most persuasive and compelling way by conducting your own frontline research in this area. Look how good the Numinous can be for your work. Look how good the stress management techniques that Erin gives you are for your work. Look at the role and value of technology for your work, and follow your leaders and have and amplify your voice in the professional domains. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ralph Piedmont. Brian, last thoughts?
Just that I'm hoping that we can have a more globalized approach to medicine for helping each other, and that we can rely on each other regardless of what countries we're from, what languages we speak. and that we can have empathy and care for one another on a global basis. And I want to thank my distinguished panelists that are here today. Mental health, mental wellness, and mental health, and coming out of this pandemic, and better than when we started it is a must.
Absolutely.
And nursing, frankly, a thank you to all the nursing students and the people that are associated with nursing. You guys are the heroes. You really are. And we're honored to, if my kids are sick or I'm sick, we take it for granted that hopefully somebody's there to care for us. And you do the heavy lift every day. So your jobs are absolutely mission critical to the future betterment of the world. So thank you. We're honored to be here, and I hope to be visiting your countries and meeting many of you as we progress. And I hope that and expect that we're going to come out of this pandemic as a better human race and a more learned group of individuals. And we're going to do wonderful things to change healthcare for the better of societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Y gracias a todos. Y así, Janice, felicidades.
And Janice, congratulations. Just as they said, each and every one of the panelists said, you, our nurses, you are the real heroes in our nation. And now we just want to make the most to thank each and every one of our panelists for their time, their contributions to today's webinar, which we truly hope will be able to aid greater sustainability in the health sector by strengthening our health professionals to keep and maintain healthy nurses for healthy nations. On behalf of Hippo Hive in Spanish and the Edla Digital, who has also made this webinar possible, and on behalf of all of our collaborators and the National Nursing Council of Guatemala, Hippo Technologies Inc., Every, and the Center of Professional Studies, thank you everyone for your involvement and participation, and we hope to stay tuned to our social media and also to check our Hippo Hive website, and you can sign up and stay informed with lots of health and wellness information. We hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone. I was Mildred Espinosa, and until next time.